David Carradine was more than just the martial arts master of Kung Fu or the chilling Bill in Tarantino's Kill Bill. He was a Hollywood icon whose life ended in a way that still haunts fans worldwide. Found dead in a Bangkok hotel room, his passing was ruled accidental, yet whispers of foul play and conspiracy have never faded. Even today, rumors swirl online, claiming he never truly died, fueling endless speculation. Was it tragedy, scandal, or something darker? Let's step into the shadows of Carradine's mysterious final act. David Carradine. The legendary actor John Arthur Carradine Jr., known as David Carradine, was born on December 8, 1936 in Hollywood, L.A. David was the son of legendary actor John Carradine and his mother, Ardennell Abigail McCool, sometimes cited as Ardennell McCool Roll. His arrival wasn't calm, but into a storm of ambition, ego, and fractured love, the kind that would shape every shadow of his life. The Carradine name was already carved very deeply into the Hollywood foundations through his dad. His early years were marked by family turmoil. His parents' marriage was highly unstable with frequent separations. When David was around 7 years old, things weren't going well for him. His parents had divorced. This had a significant emotional effect on his personal life, which caused frequent relocations between homes and guardians. He experienced severe emotional stress during this time. Various accounts and Carradine's own interviews mention that he once attempted suicide at the age of 5, which he later described as an act of confusion rather than intent. Following his parents' divorce, both remarried, while David's relationship with his mother was reportedly strained and uneasy. He often felt displaced and struggled with his identity and belonging, themes that later echoed in his acting roles, especially the wandering monk persona in Kung Fu. During his early teenage years, Carradine lived partly with his father and partly with other relatives, moving frequently between Los Angeles, New York, and Oakland. He attended Oakland High School, where he participated in school theater and began developing an interest in performance and music. After graduating, he attended Oakland Junior College, now Merritt College, for a short time. He later transferred to San Francisco State College, San Francisco State University, where he studied music, and from there he got his early passion for music and art, which remained throughout his life. David's voice in the industry. David's manner of speaking was leisurely and rhythmic, punctuated by frequent, thoughtful pauses. His deep and mellow voice was characterized by a pleasant texture, which served to emphasize his air of composed wisdom and otherworldliness. He had an American accent, but he could seamlessly shift to neutral or regional tones when the situation required it. The natural cadence of his speech was accompanied by a mellow California rhythm, with a subtle theatrical tinge that was the result of his training on the stage. Carradine spent time in the early 1960s working as an actor in theater productions. During this time, he trained his voice to be resonant, clear, and capable of projection while performing on Broadway, including the Royal Hunt of the Sun. In addition, he learned about vocal discipline from his time acting on stage, which enabled him to develop the skill of speaking softly while still capturing his audience's attention, a signature characteristic of his later performances. He relied on his ability to manipulate his voice to a significant degree to portray Kwai Chang Caine. His speech was delivered in a low, hardly audible voice, and his movements were very much like that of a Zen master. The way that he chose to phrase things was similar to the way that one would engage in meditation breathing, bringing attention to the spiritual and philosophical aspects of his personality. This gave his voice an unmistakable quality and a composed yet commanding tone, with a sense of power being conveyed through silence rather than through loudness. His voice was connected with a number of the show's philosophical precepts, such as Patience, Grasshopper, by many viewers, and these lessons eventually became pop cultural trademarks. His career before Hollywood. Carradine was able to provide for himself throughout his time in college by engaging in various professions, including construction work, sketch art, and music instruction. Additionally, he composed instrumental pieces for college performances and played in small local groups. balancing the arts of music, theater, and painting with a sense of independence from mainstream employment. These early positions reflected the bohemian lifestyle that he upheld for most of his life. David was enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1960. He spent time in the military at Fort Eustis in Virginia, where he assisted in the establishment of the Fort Eustis Playhouse, a small theatrical company operated by military personnel that presented leisure plays. David Carradine served as an actor, writer, and director within the Army troop. This military theater experience was crucial, paying tribute to his ability to lead others, his talent, as well as his genuine stage discipline. After David completed his military service, he was honorably dismissed from the Army. Following this, he decided to pursue a career in professional acting. His goal was to establish himself in the professional theater world, and so he relocated to New York City. Initially, he struggled to secure consistent employment and adopted a frugal lifestyle, performing in off-Broadway and regional theater productions. His tall stature, rich voice, and dramatic performances helped him become a well-known figure in the New York theater scene. David's breakthrough role in Hollywood. By the late 1960s, Carradine was a talented but not yet famous actor. He had already won acclaim on Broadway and appeared in early TV series such as Shane, 1966, and in small film roles, including Boxcar Bertha in 1972, directed by Martin Scorsese. However, none of these roles gave him mainstream recognition. In 1971, Warner Brothers and ABC began developing a new television series called Kung Fu, a unique blend of Western and Eastern philosophy centered on a Shaolin monk wandering through the American Old West. Hui Cheng Kane was a half-Chinese, half-American Shaolin priest trained in Kung Fu and Taoist philosophy. After killing a Chinese royal in self-defense, he flees to the United States in the 1870s, wandering the frontier in search of his half-brother while helping others in need. The show's format alternated between present-day Western adventures and flashbacks to Kane's youth in a Shaolin temple, where his masters, notably Master Po and Master Khan, taught him wisdom through parables. This role required not just action skills, but also a spiritual presence and someone who could project calm, wisdom, and moral balance. The show was originally conceived for Bruce Lee, who helped pitch the idea to Warner Brothers. However, studio executives considered Lee too Asian for American TV at the time, which was a reflection of Hollywood's biases in the early 1970s. The role went to David Carradine, who, although not trained in martial arts at that point, had the calm, philosophical demeanor the role demanded, experience in both Western and Eastern-inspired drama, a meditative voice, and physical stillness that fit the show's tone perfectly. Carradine quickly studied basic kung fu movement, meditation, and breathing techniques to prepare for the role. The Kung Fu series. The pilot movie aired on ABC in February 1972, followed by a full series. The show was an immediate success, blending spiritual lessons, martial arts, and Western dramas in a way American television had never seen before. Carradine's portrayal of Kane, with a soft, introspective, and morally centered attitude, captivated audiences. David's signature lines were "Patience, grasshopper," and "When you can snatch the pebble from my hand, it will be time for you to leave." Today, people still quote these iconic pop culture references. David was nominated for Emmy Awards 1973 and 74 for an outstanding performance as a lead actor in a drama series. He also received Golden Globe nominations in 1974 and 75 for Best Actor in a Television Drama. Kung Fu popularized martial arts and Eastern philosophy in Western media, predating the martial arts craze of the late 1970s. The show influenced countless later works from Star Wars to The Matrix. The serene, mystical, wandering monk archetype became permanently associated with Carradine. He grew his hair long, adopted meditation and martial arts into his own life, and became an emblem of the 1970s spiritual counterculture. The role made Carradine a household name, but also typecast him as a Zen mystic figure. After Kung Fu ended in 1975, he sought to break free of that image through diverse film roles like Bound for Glory in 1976 and Death Race 2000 in 75. while still Kwai Chang Caine remained his most recognized and defining character. David's relation with his dad. John was often absent during David's childhood due to his demanding acting career and multiple marriages. However, as adults, David and John reconciled and even worked together on several film projects, including The Good Guys and the Bad Guys in 1969 and The Long Riders in 1980. In interviews after his father's death, David described him as a true original, a man of eccentric brilliance and artistic depth. John inspired David's interest in acting and Shakespearean performance. David often credited his father for instilling in him a love of the arts and a respect for the power of voice and presence on stage. David gravitated toward complex, often spiritual or unconventional characters, reflecting John's eclectic career. Watching his father juggle dozens of film roles over the course of decades gave David a sense of persistence and professionalism in Hollywood. After John died in 1988, David publicly reflected on his father with fondness and respect, emphasizing John's brilliance as a performer, the inspiration he provided in terms of artistic dedication, and the complexity of their relationship as father and son. Despite the early distance, David's relationship with John ultimately evolved into one of admiration and familiar pride. David's own children and family later carried on the Carradine acting legacy, continuing the influence of John's artistic example. John Carradine's death marked the end of an era. Still, his legacy continued through his children, and the Carradines remain one of Hollywood's longest-running acting dynasties, spanning over 4 generations. After the passing of the legend. David, who had reconciled with his father in previous decades, felt the loss deeply, but also reflected on his father's artistic influence. Interviews from this period indicate David viewed his father's legacy as both an inspiration and a benchmark for his own career. This period was also marked by David's personal introspection, a theme consistent with his interest in spirituality and martial arts. After 1988, David continued to work steadily in film and television, often appearing in both mainstream and cult projects such as action and martial arts films. David took on smaller indie projects to explore complex characters, reflecting his father's eclectic legacy. He also began collaborating with European and Asian filmmakers, particularly in the genres of martial arts and action films, solidifying his international fan base. David's personal life remained colorful and complex after his father's death. He continued to be involved in spiritual and martial arts practices, traveling frequently to Asia. His relationships were often high-profile and sometimes turbulent, reflecting the independent streak he inherited from his father. David maintained close ties with his siblings, especially Keith and Robert, as the Carradine family navigated Hollywood's evolving landscape. David Carradine and Bruce Carradine. Bruce Carradine was the eldest son of John Carradine, and both were part of the Carradine acting dynasty. However, Bruce's career remained mostly low-profile compared to David's international fame. Growing up, the brothers experienced their father's frequent absences due to John Carradine's demanding acting career. Similar to David, Bruce also felt the influence of their father's artistic sensibilities, although he did not pursue Hollywood to the same extent. Bruce appeared in a few television and film roles, mostly minor parts, and did not achieve widespread recognition in Hollywood. The difference in fame sometimes meant that David's career overshadowed Bruce's, but there's no public record of tension. Their relationship was generally private and familiar, rather than a professional rivalry. David and Bruce reportedly had a respectful and supportive relationship because Bruce mainly stayed out of the Hollywood spotlight. Their interactions were more personal than professional. They shared the experience of growing up in a large, artistically driven family, and both were influenced by John Carradine's eccentric personality and theatrical discipline. Unlike David's well-documented life and career, Bruce's life remained private, resulting in limited public information about their day-to-day relationship. However, family interviews and biographies suggest that David viewed Bruce as part of the foundation of his family's acting legacy and appreciated their shared upbringing under John Carradine. Secrets behind the spotlight. Carradine stated in interviews that at a specific period of time he was smoking, drinking alcohol extensively, and taking psychotropic drugs. Prior to the beginning of his career as an actor, there were claims that he had spent time in a reform school as a teenager and had connections to a gang that operated in Los Angeles. Later in his life, his personal life and some activities he engaged in attracted public attention after one of his ex-wives claimed he frequently enjoyed binding himself up, attaching himself to bedposts, and used neckties and belts. Public frequently saw Carradine as a person who was calm, spiritual, and intellectual, and he was most popularly remembered for his portrayal of the character Kwai Chang Caine in the television series Kung Fu. One of the remarks that he made was, "I have the feeling that I am a man who is entirely nonviolent." During his time behind the scenes, he expressed his limited knowledge of Kung Fu. The fact that the remark, "I was pretending the entire time," indicates that performance, as opposed to real competence, was responsible for a substantial percentage of the mystique. Struggles and drawbacks. David Carradine attempted suicide at age 5 after learning that he and his brother had different biological fathers. His parents divorced when he was about 7, creating instability in his early home life. He spent portions of his youth bouncing between boarding schools, foster homes, and reform schools. After his breakthrough role, he struggled to break free of the wandering monk image. This limited some of his opportunities. He later took roles in low-budget or poorly received films, for instance, Death Sport in 1978, which he himself called a career blunder. Carradine has documented struggles with drugs, and he faced arrests for driving under the influence and other legal issues during his adult life. He was married multiple times, often cited as 5, and his personal relationships were frequently turbulent. The demands of his career, travel, and public image put additional strain on his private life. Carradine openly discussed times of deep unhappiness, including describing himself as practically suicidal during the making of Bound for Glory. He admitted that the pressures of fame, performance, and personal identity weighed heavily on him. These struggles affected his career trajectory, and after early success, periods of lesser roles followed, possibly due to typecasting, reputation, and personal issues. His public image contrasted with his private life. The serene philosophical mentor figure he portrayed in Kung Fu belied a more chaotic, vulnerable inner life. The accumulation of personal, professional, and emotional challenges likely influenced the later years of his life, contributing to so-called shadow episodes that occurred behind the spotlight. What the cameras didn't see of David Carradine. On screen, Carradine was the calm, disciplined monk Kwai Chang Caine, who is the very symbol of inner peace. Off-screen, however, his life was restless and chaotic. He characterized himself as a person battling against his own energy. Friends said he could shift from deep tranquility to fiery intensity in seconds. He genuinely studied martial arts and Eastern philosophy, but his practice was less about peace and more about control, which was a way to manage his personal demons. Despite appearing wise and spiritual, Carradine has privately struggled with anger, anxiety, and addiction throughout his adulthood. As the eldest son of actor John Carradine, David grew up surrounded by talent and trauma. His father was brilliant but emotionally distant, and his mother was often overwhelmed. David once said, "Being a Carradine was both a blessing and a curse. The name opened doors, but it also came with ghosts." That tension haunted him. He wanted to honor his father while also escaping his legacy, often rebelling against Hollywood traditions. David lived like a drifter in real life, mirroring his famous TV character, constantly traveling, never settling for long. He lived in dozens of homes, often leaving them half-packed. When not working, he was known to retreat to solitude, painting, playing guitar, or practicing sword forms in his yard. His friend Michael Madsen described him as a man who wouldn't sit still spiritually or physically. That restlessness, while fueling creativity, also led to broken marriages and loneliness, as well as estrangement from loved ones. What cameras didn't capture were his lifelong battles with addiction to substances, with risk and intensity. His former partners described him as magnetic but dangerous, constantly pushing limits, spiritually or physically. David Carradine and Annie Bierman. Annie Bierman and David Carradine exchanged vows on December 26, 2004, at the residence of actor Michael Madsen, which is located in Malibu, California. When David and Annie got married, David was approximately 68 years old, while Annie was around 44 years old. David gained a new family unit and stepchildren, Annie's children, as a result of this marriage. Before they got married, the two were seen together in public at a number of different events and premieres. They were photographed at the premiere of the film Hero in August of 2004, for example. Reviews of David's biography mention that during this later period of his life, he spoke about being in excellent shape and having younger acquaintances, including a younger wife named Annie. In comparison to several of his previous relationships, this marriage appeared to be more secure, and Annie stayed his wife until he passed away. Annie and David married one another after David had spent a great deal of time working in Hollywood, going through a great deal of marriages and partnerships, and just a few years prior to David's passing in the year 2009. David could be in a rejuvenation phase of his life by being in a union with Annie, given that she is somewhat younger than he and that they have publicly presented themselves as a stable family unit at an advanced stage in his life. Obituaries and career summaries frequently mention their marriage, suggesting its significant role in his personal life story. David Carradine's final years. David Carradine starred in the film Kill Bill in 2003 and revitalized his international career. He played Bill, a calm but deadly assassin, showing that he could combine the wisdom of his kung fu persona with a darker, violent edge. He received renewed recognition from both fans and critics. David worked on several smaller films, some martial arts-oriented, some experimental. Some of his titles include The Executioner's Song and Stretch, 2001, posthumous release. And he often blended martial arts expertise with acting, mentoring younger actors on set. Television appearances, such as guest roles on shows like Masters of Horror in 2005, and other TV projects showcase David's ongoing presence in genre entertainment. His relationships remained complex as he had multiple marriages and fathered children. He maintained ties with siblings, including his famous acting family, brother Keith Carradine. Although not widely publicized, Carradine had struggled with substance use earlier in his life. By the 2000s, he seemed relatively stable and maintained his fitness for performing in the martial arts, performing and demonstrating lifelong dedication to Tai Chi and related disciplines. David continued his interest in Eastern philosophy and martial arts. He publicly expressed that his acting career and martial arts practice were intertwined with personal growth and spiritual exploration. He was preparing for the film Stretch in 2011 in Bangkok. It was intended as a low-budget thriller. This was his final project, which he didn't know about. He spent his evenings at the Swiss Hotel Niler Park, an upscale hotel tucked behind manicured gardens and quiet hallways. The mysterious death of David Carradine, Hollywood star. For 3 days, David kept his routine simple, filming during the day and relaxing at night. On June 3rd, the cast and the crew planned to meet for dinner at Bangkok's busy Red District, a typical night out after work. David was supposed to join them, but as they prepared to leave, he didn't answer his door or his phone. His assistant tried knocking repeatedly. Nothing. Assuming he had fallen asleep or changed his mind, they left without him. Later that night, Carradine called his assistant. His voice was casual, almost playful. "Did you guys leave without me?" he asked. When told they were already at dinner, he said, "All right, I'll catch up." But he never did. No one saw him alive again. The next morning, June 4th, 2009, around 10:45, a hotel maid entered the room to clean. What she found would make headlines around the world. Inside the closet, David's body hung suspended by a curtain cord. His hands were positioned above his head. The scene was shocking, even to seasoned Thai police. There was no suicide note, no evidence of a struggle, and nothing in the room suggested robbery or intrusion. Within hours, the Bangkok Metropolitan Police confirmed the basics. David Carradine died at 72 by asphyxiation. But the details left more questions than answers. The configuration of the cords didn't match a typical suicide. The final experiment. The investigators started to think that this was a completely different situation at hand. An unintentional death that's perhaps related to an incident of autoerotic asphyxiation, which is a practice that involves self-inflicted oxygen deprivation while engaging in this activity. Dr. Pornip Rosensand is a forensic expert from Thailand who is widely recognized for her work. She conducted an examination of the facts and officially declared that the death seems to have been an accident. She stated that the ties implied that David had been doing experiments. Investigators suspected a possible accidental death due to an act of autoerotic asphyxiation, a practice that involved the system. She informed the press that it was neither an act of murder nor a suicide. It was an act of a private nature that went beyond what was acceptable. However, the members of Carradine's family weren't satisfied. Annie Bierman, his widow, requested that she be given some answers and subsequently recruited Dr. Michael Baden, the former medical examiner for New York City, to carry out a second autopsy in the United States. The findings of Baden corroborated the results of the tie, confirmed that the cause of death was asphyxiation, found no evidence of suicide, and revealed that the rope's pattern demonstrated that there were no other individuals involved. Baden stated that there was no way that he could have completed the task of binding the body in the manner that it was done if there had been another individual present in the room. The day on which Carradine was laid to rest was June 13, 2009, and the location of the ceremony was Los Angeles. The man behind the headlines. In the months that followed, his name filled tabloids and talk shows, but the truth of his final moments remained murky. Between 2009 and 2013, more than a dozen of his unfinished films were released posthumously, small performances that kept his voice alive even after his death. To the world, his passing became one of Hollywood's most haunted mysteries. When the news of his death broke out, it spread like a forest wildfire across each and every screen and headline worldwide. In a single day, his name became less about his decades of work and more about the way he died. The story was shocking, and the media seized it with no restraint. Tabloids published photos, gossip, and speculation. The morning shows debated movies, and the public couldn't look away. And what began as grief turned into spectacle. Journalists argued whether the coverage had crossed a line, whether privacy, even in his death, still belonged to a man who had lived his life in front of the camera. For those who had known Carradine personally, it was painful to watch. To them, he wasn't the man in the headlines, but he was the friend who never stopped working and thought of others, the artist who couldn't sit still, and the actor who showed up to every set, ready to give everything he had. In his lifetime, he appeared in more than 200 projects. Industry peers called him the hardest-working actor in the universe. It wasn't an exaggeration, but it was the truth. He worked until there was nothing left to give. The widow of David Carradine talks of life of secrets. When David Carradine died in Bangkok, Annie Bierman filed a wrongful death suit against the production company behind his last film, Stretch. She claimed negligence by the production company, French company MK2 Productions, regarding Carradine's supervision in Bangkok. Annie reached a settlement with the company in a wrongful death claim. She also publicly challenged the notion that Carradine's death was suicide, asserting that he was not suicidal. The wrongful death suit revealed behind-the-scenes tensions between families, production companies, and investigations into Carradine's death in Bangkok. Annie's role brought to light details that were otherwise largely private. As a widow, Annie faced the dual role of preserving Carradine's legacy while also navigating media scrutiny of his death, personal life, and the mystery surrounding the circumstances. With Carradine's previous marriages, multiple children, stepchildren, and complex family tree, Annie's challenge included managing blended family relationships and estate matters. She had to balance honoring Carradine's accomplishments in television and film with confronting uncomfortable truths, his legal troubles, and private struggles. Being the spouse of a Hollywood star who died under odd circumstances placed Annie in a role of both public figure and grieving partner, with a difficult dual role with both support and exposure. Annie Bierman's involvement turned her into the gatekeeper of Carradine's final chapter, and she influenced how his death was discussed, legally framed, and publicly remembered. Her claims and actions extended the narrative of Carradine beyond his life to include responsibilities of production companies, safety in filmmaking abroad, and the rights of families of actors. The Weight of the World and David Carradine. Carradine struggled to step out of his father's shadow. He had talent and presence, but Hollywood saw him as John Carradine's son, not yet his own man. Yet he also carried the restless energy of a man searching for meaning between stage work, television, and personal turmoil. Arrests, broken relationships, and bouts of depression punctuate this period. Even as his career took shape, he bore the invisible pressure of needing to prove himself worthy of the Carradine name. When Kung Fu debuted, Carradine became a global icon, whose face, voice, and calm demeanor were synonymous with Eastern wisdom. Yet the role that made him famous also chained him to an image he didn't fully live up to. He once said, "Everyone wanted me to be Cain, but I was still trying to figure out how to be David." The fame was massive but isolating. Fans saw the piece, and he felt the pressure. He used martial arts and meditation to seek balance, but also turned to alcohol and drugs to escape the spotlight's intensity. Post-Kung Fu, Carradine faced Hollywood's fickle side. He was typecast, and serious offers dwindled. He took on eccentric, low-budget films, some brilliant, bound for glory, others forgettable. Personally, he cycled through 4 marriages, each reflecting his struggle to find stability. He was known to friends as both deeply loving and impossible to live with. These years showed the double burden he carried, the artist's hunger to create, and the man's inability to attain peace. David Carradine's legacy. Carradine's mysterious death in 2009 shocked the Hollywood industry. It reminded the public of the darker reality of stardom, that behind fame often lies pain and solitude. After his death, tributes poured in from colleagues like Quentin Tarantino, Michael Madsen, and Lucy Liu. Tarantino called him a man who could make the air around him feel mythic. He received renewed appreciation for his lifelong dedication to art, philosophy, and self-expression. His widow, Annie, continues to preserve his legacy, highlighting his artistry over the sensationalism of his death. Its image remains iconic, representing a bridge between East and West, calm and chaos, and cinema and spirit. Even after his passing, Carradine's work continues to inspire filmmakers, musicians, and philosophers. His life story, flawed, poetic, and human, is now viewed as a parable of the artist's journey to search for truth in an illusion, to find peace within turmoil, and to live as both student and teacher. As he once said, "If I can make someone feel a little more alive, then I've done my job." A legendary actor and eternal wanderer, your art and spirit continue to inspire. Gone from our sight, but never from our hearts. Thanks for watching Past Paradise, where Hollywood legends come home. If you enjoyed today's look into the topic, the mysterious death of David Carradine, the Hollywood star, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Got a star or story you want next? Drop it in the comments. Until then, keep the nostalgia alive, only on Past Paradise.